wanted to make a project from scratch, and that included equipment and everything to show really that you don't need that much to get going in welding.
We're gonna make an end table to prove that we're able to do it. So we're using some material, 15 feet of 1-inch square tubing and a pre-cut piece of plywood.
Let's get to it. $359 and $14.99. So I pretty much scored at Harbor Freight, picking up a majority of the tools needed. That included some safety gear. Right off the bat, I knew we were going to be doing a box type frame, and with that, this type of square was out, and I would want a framing square. And that's because it has a nice 45-degree angle on it. As I'm laying out my steel, I like to go from end to end with the tape measure, and I mark it with actually a razor blade. But this makes a nice groove in the metal so that you can see it, and it's very fine, so then when you are cutting, you know you've got a perfect cut when you just are right butted up against that line. The cheapest way to cut metal would be with an angle grinder and some cutoff wheels. Typically they sell them in packs of 10 because they're that cheap, and so this allows you to actually cut the metal. Starting with the box section, I knew I wanted some mitered corners, meaning I cut it at 45-degree angles. That allows you to butt up the ends and not have any open tubing showing. It's just kind of a nicer, cleaner look. So with that, cutting a 45-degree angle with just an angle grinder is a little more difficult, but it was worth taking the extra time getting the cuts just right for that nice, clean fit up. As you can tell, I'm down on my concrete floor, and this might be one of the only advantages I have over Tim. That's because, well, I've done many projects including go-kart frames and railings right there on that concrete floor, so let's just say my back might not hurt as bad as Tim's at the end of this. Using a cutoff wheel or abrasive saw leaves some flashing on the end. So use that same angle grinder and switch out the head for a grinder disc, and just a couple passes with that cleans those up really nice and easy. It also leaves a nice beveled edge ready to weld. The toaster, you thought I was kidding this time. No, literally my toaster is bigger than this welder that I ended up picking up. Yes, I ended up getting a work. As far as the welding helmet, well, this was the cheapest auto darkening helmet I ended up finding. And I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of squinting just a little bit for those first couple welds just to make sure that it did auto darken, and it did. It actually worked great throughout the whole project. Now I ended up using the piece of wood as a template. If this were going to be a real project for show or sell, I wouldn't do that because the wood does get some of those burn marks from your tack weld. I went through and tacked each corner, and then I flipped it upside down and tacked the other side. Definitely not necessary, but something that lots of people do is grinding down your tacks. And what that allows you to do is get a nice bead, consistent bead throughout, instead of having a little bump or having a start and stop in the middle of the weld. Despite the size, this thing does pack a punch, especially on 220 power. One of the downsides I did find with it was restriking. With a brand new rod, I was able to strike an arc very easily, but anytime I went to restrike it, yep, I had a hard time. Just like up on top, I ended up tacking the legs in place. Now if you were to lay a full bead on one of the sides of the legs, it would totally warp and you would not be able to move it. And just doing those couple tacks allows you to actually move it after the fact so that you have perfect angles before you go lay the full bead. I ended up making some tabs just out of the scrap that we had left over. I cut it a couple inches down, and that gave me a couple nice flat tabs to lay the tabletop on. Here's another instance where I used the wood as a jig. The wood is only 3/4 of an inch. The frame was 1 inch, so my tabs were just a 1/4 inch down off the frame, and that allowed the wood to sit perfectly flat with the frame. The last step was to use a flap disc, flapper disc, sand disc, whatever you want to call it, and that allows you to get the nice shiny surface for the finished product, so then you could either leave it like that or it's perfect prep for your paint. My table's finished, and let's head on over. I'm kind of curious to see how Tim's turned out and what equipment he ended up getting. Tim, did you build a table?
I built a table. How about you, Jeff?
I built a table. Real question though is probably, did we do it under budget? So we were both under budget. I did mine for about $175.
And I was right at $189.
Tim, what welder did you get and why?
So I picked up this Welder ARC 120DS or 125. Anyway, I picked it up. It was $60 on Amazon, which there were a few other machines in that range, but I'd heard of Welder before, so I figured I'd give it a try. What'd you get?
I got the Stalwork. Yes, there's many wonderful names for welders on Amazon. How well did your welder weld?
So I thought it worked pretty well once you got an arc struck, but actually striking that arc, it was a little weaker right out of the gate than what I'm used to. So it made it a little harder for things like restarts and whatnot. But overall, it did definitely get the job done.
And we were both very similar with rods. I picked up some 70-18.
And then I picked up some 70-18 as well, just because I like the smooth bead appearance. But I also got some 60-11s from Harbor Freight, just because they're a little easier to restart for tacking things together. Not essential, but kind of nice to have. Something else that was different was the way we marked our parts. I thought what Jeff came up with was pretty unique. I just bought a couple of Sharpies off Amazon.
I went with a straight up razor blade. So not very many people know about this trick, but just a very simple razor blade gets you a very fine, definite line. It's a little hard to see, but that is a very straight, narrow line so that you know when you're cutting right up against that line that your dimensions are right on.
One other thing that was different is I sprung for a better chipping hammer rather than using the metal bristle toothbrush that's included with these machines. What tools do you think you'd get next? I mean, if you wanted to go a little bit beyond this basic $200 set that we got, what would you look for?
Yeah, I would probably upgrade my welder just based on the ability to get some of those extra features. If this is something you're going to be doing a lot of projects with, or even want to turn it into a business, definitely well worth the investment in nicer machines for that. But offhand, it's not bad to get started to even see if you like this type of stuff. What would you upgrade?
So I would probably pick a different welding process. I would upgrade to maybe a flux core welder that could go with a little bit thinner material, especially starting out as a hobbyist. So I think that would be worth a little bit extra. I've stick welded for a long time, so it's not too big of a deal for me, but would be a good upgrade as well. Some of the other things that would be nice are a welding table, even a portable folding one. I think do you have the Harbor Freight one or something like it?
And in the process of making my own, so stay tuned for that.
Oh, sweet. So anyway, something like that would be helpful. Also, a better saw for cutting, like a chop saw, even an abrasive chop saw. Huge time saver. You can definitely do it with an angle grinder. It just takes a bit longer than with a chop saw.
Definitely second the angle grinder. If you're going to be making lots of cuts, like I've done railings where I've had to make 100+ cuts, that would be pretty much impossible to do with just an angle grinder. All right, that's all we got for this one. Thanks for watching. If you're on my channel, definitely go over and watch Tim's. You'll learn a whole bunch from his videos. Check out the description for that, and we'll see you. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching.
All right, we'll see you.